look at this and say this is going to be a process in which we develop a document, which is the actual IEP plan. It's the program for your child. Are you ready, Vanna?
Yes.
We're going to have a little bit of fun today. I believe you're being taped. Is everybody got their best side? Put your camera here. And you may end up on YouTube, so we'll really have a lot of fun here. In general, when we talk about this process, everything that your child is going to get, every decision made about your child is going to be done at that IEP meeting. All the services that your child is going to receive should be clearly outlined in that document when it is produced and finished. It is the same repetitive procedural process that you're going to use from the time your child turns 3 until they exit with a standard diploma or age out at 22. So that process you're going to use continuously. And we look at the child, we look at the whole child when we look at the IEP process. Okay, Deanna, you ready back there?
No, the IC
We're just going to use this as kind of a backdrop and maybe flow with it. I know that you all came out here today to get questions answered. So by the end of this workshop, what I really want you to do is have that question answered. So if you have those questions during the presentation, it's going to go relatively quick. It's a lot of material to cover, but to me it's more important to answer your question than it is to go completely through the material. But let's just start flipping through, Vienna.
1 second.
And we're gone. And we're back. And so hit the first one. Family Network on Disability is the one that's putting on this conference today. We're family driven, we're a nonprofit. All the services that we provide to you are absolutely free to you. And they're being provided by parents of children with disabilities. So I've been through this process. My youngest son, age of 6 months, spinal meningitis, hydrocephalus, water on the brain, had to have a shunt installed. And he lost 90–95% of his hearing. My son became deaf. They told me he would never be able to read above a 3rd grade level because he was deaf. Going into the 3rd grade, they said they didn't have the services in the neighborhood school for my son. Then they told me they didn't have the services within our county. So they put my little boy on a bus in the 3rd grade and they shipped him to a neighboring county, which put my child on the bus for 5 hours a day just to go to school. Removed him from his community to another county. So I had to learn what my procedural safeguards are, including the IEP process, everything else that we're teaching you here today, and become my child's advocate and apply those things to my son. I got him returned back to the school. He would have attended if he didn't have a disability in a regular education environment with all the supports and services the law said he was entitled to. Consequently, my little boy graduated high school honors AP courses with an AB average, went on to do 2 years of college, is now living independently, married with 2 sons of his own in North Carolina, and off my couch. And that's what we all want for our children. We want them to be gainfully employed, living independently, and pursuing their own quality of life. We're not attorneys. They really get upset if we're going out there practicing law without a license. What we're providing you is information that is in the public domain. It's out there for anybody to find. When I first began, before Al Gore invented the internet, we had to use these things that used to have cords attached to them. You know, there was a dial like that. Telephone, I had to go out there and use the phone book. I had to go out there and find that information. Today, you have the instant gratification of information 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. But as a parent, you're going to be the advocate for this child. So you need to have that knowledge. And in knowledge, there is power in participating. But you have to be part of the process. You have to be involved. When we're talking about public education, public schools are what we make them. And that takes parent involvement, and that takes more than once a year. You have to get out there, you have to be involved, you have to support the school and support your teacher. And we know those are really hard things to do sometimes, being a parent of children with disabilities. But if you want to be successful, that's what we need to do. So here are the principles of IDEA. And when we look at the provision of a free, appropriate public education, or FAPE. That is the basis of the IEP process. Under the 14th Amendment to the Constitution, all citizens of the United States are entitled to certain civil rights and liberties, and among those is the right to a free public education at public expense, no cost to you. But when we come to children with disabilities, it has to be appropriate, an appropriate education, because their needs are different and they need more to have that equal access to an education. Appropriate evaluation. When we look at developing an IEP, that evaluation is the most critical part. And that's why Congress recognized as you as parents need to participate in this process. Because who knows the child best? Anyone? Who knows the child best? Who? Come on, I can't hear it. What was that?
We do.
Ah, the parents, absolutely. God, I love to have dads here. That's just a beautiful thing. And so, as parents, you need to provide any and all that information to the school. So when we get that evaluation, what we come down to is that is where the child currently is. That's the basis for building this whole document. The whole IEP is based on that evaluation piece that says where we are, because we're going to build on that to say where we want to go 1 year from today. So that piece has to be correct. And then we develop the IEP under IDEA, that parent-student participation, and the child, when they get to that point, because what we want as parents is we want them to live independently and make their own decisions. So as soon as possible in the process, and as a parent, that's your decision, we start involving the student, we start involving the child. Because the first thing we have to do is teach ourselves to be advocates for our children. Then we have to teach our children to be advocates for themselves. So in that process, you want to start involving the student in there. And I can think of all these things that happened to me in 18 years, and one of those was I failed to get my son involved when he went to high school for his freshman year. So here I am at the IEP table, and I got my advocate coat on, I got my 504, I got my ADA, I got my idea, and I'm going to the table, and I'm ready to do business. So I'm out there, and I'm spouting out, I want real-time captioning, I want, all these things for my son, and I'm going through this process, and then I get around the table, and I look to my son, and I go, well, what do you want? And he said, I don't want any of it. Well, there's my bubble, just got busted, because I didn't ask him ahead of time to get him involved in what he wanted. The hardest thing to take wasn't the fact that he didn't want everything I wanted for him. The hardest thing to take was the smirks on all the professionals' faces at the table because the big bad advocate just got shot down because he did not involve his son in the process. And he was right. He didn't want the full-time one-on-one aid. He didn't want all this assistive technology. He just wanted his hearing aids, his FM trainer, and he wanted a specially designed instruction when he needed it. And he went on and he was very successful. Like I said, he's off my couch. And he's got two just like him, too. And that's what I really like. And then we have the right to be taught in a least restrictive environment, meaning to the maximum extent appropriate. A child with a disability shall be taught alongside their non-disabled peers. And that is taught. So where are we taught? In a classroom. So when we really look at least restrictive environment, we're looking at being taught within a classroom setting and providing those services. The rest of the school environment is a given. I have a right to participate in assemblies. I have a right to transportation. I have a right to participate in after-school activities. A right to go to lunch. All those are a given. So when we're really looking at least restrictive environment, when we're talking about IDEA, we're looking at being taught alongside non-disabled peers, those kids in the classroom, with use of those supplemental aids and services that are non-exhaustive. So it's really got to be based on need, okay? And then your procedural safeguards. Never ever do I allow my staff to use the word fight. What we do is we exercise our procedural safeguards as parents. We're always nice. You got to leave the emotions at home. And yes, mothers, I know how hard that is, but you have to do it. And you go in and you do clearly documented, collaborative business. And that's what provides the best outcome.
Family, please report to child care. Attention. Will the inmate family please report to child care? Your children are okay, but you do need to report to child care as soon as possible.
Thank you. So moving on. So we need to be equal partners in this process. But you don't have veto power as a parent. The school system has that responsibility to write the IEP, to implement the IEP, and to teach your child. That legally, that is their responsibility. What we do as parents is we participate in that. You're involved, you're an active partner, and if you disagree, you exercise your procedural safeguards. There we go. And this is the process that you will start with a referral, and anyone can make that referral for special education. You can make that request as a parent. Or maybe a doctor will see your child early and they will make that referral. But once that referral is made, then we need to have consent. So there's many things through this process that require parental consent. There's a little word in front of consent. Can anybody tell me what that word is?
Informed.
Informed, absolutely. Informed is the word in front of consent. For me to give my consent for initial evaluation or initial placement in special education, I need to know, and I need to ask those questions. How many in this room have ever went to an IEP meeting? You've sat down, you've walked in, there may be 10 professionals there and you, and they hand you your procedural safeguards. You know that sheet that said these are your rights? And they hand them to you like this, and they go, do you understand? And what do you do?
Yes.
Shake your head, yes. But do you know? Do you really know what those procedural safeguards are? No. So if you don't know, ask. There is absolutely no shame in not knowing. There's no preparation to become a parent of a child with a disability. Where the shame is in not asking. So continuously ask those questions. If you go through that evaluation process, then you want to meet with that evaluator and you want a full explanation of that evaluation before you get to the table. Because once you get there, how many of you sat through an IEP meeting with an hour of listening to a psychologist? And they like to talk. They really do. And then they ask you, do you understand? And what do you say? Yes, I understand. I don't want to appear dumb. But you don't. And it's so important that you do, because those evaluations are the baseline of the entire process. So whenever we're determining through evaluation, and how many of you have a perfect day? Every day. Anybody besides me? Oh, your children are the same way. Maybe I stayed up real late last night watching TV and you didn't know about it. Maybe I just didn't sleep well. Maybe somebody said something on the bus on the way to school, and here, this is just a snapshot in time where I'm sitting down, you're administering tests to me that's going to make the whole basis for this process. That's why you're involved in a parent, because you have that day-to-day knowledge of the child to be able to help and provide that input to say that evaluation isn't right. That doesn't really say what my child does. Consent for evaluation is conditional. So if you have a child that has fatigue problems, they can only stay focused for 15 minutes. So I know as a parent that my child is not going to be able to be tested more than 15 minutes at a time without a break. So I'm going to give conditional consent to say, yes, you can evaluate my child after you explain to me the evaluations and what they are and what they mean, and that when you test them, it'll be in increments. You have a right to observe those tests as long as you don't interfere. So you can observe the evaluation. A lot of schools have a window, two-way window, which you can observe a classroom, or something to where you can observe those the evaluation as they're being conducted. Once we go through the evaluation process, and we all have IEPs in the room, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So we've all been through the initial eligibility. No ticky, no flighty. So you have to become eligible under IDEA or Section 504, which I'm doing that workshop a little later on today, to be able to get the protections of the law and the procedural safeguards. So we've been through the eligibility meeting, and then we have our initial IEP meeting. And we sit down and we write that IEP, and only after, do you notice that placement comes after? So IEPs are written for children. They're not written for programs. They're not written for placement. You don't predetermine the placement prior to the writing of the IEP. The IEP drives that placement in the services. So we write that IEP, and then we talk about placement backing up to the least restrictive environment. That's where we begin, that regular ed setting for that initial placement. And only moving outward on a line of continuum do we do when the child cannot make that progress. Let's take a second on if response to intervention, RTI, which is a new thing under IDEA. And what response to intervention is put into place, and I believe we've got a workshop here today on RTI.
Just add it.
What response to intervention was put into place is so we don't over-identify kids who don't belong in special ed, who it may be some other factor such as language or socioeconomics in the home or just not being taught. Maybe I got a bad teacher for a year or two. And so what RTI does is we're using scientifically based research instruction, so we know it works with kids, and we're applying it across the regular education environment as a whole. And we're doing that in academics as well as we're doing it in behaviors. So what RTI is, and a lot of folks say, well, that's, we're going to be identifying less children. Well, what we're doing is we're getting that help to them sooner. So they're actually getting the tier 3, it's 3 levels of instruction. They're getting that help sooner without having to qualify, go through the process and become eligible. They're getting that. And it's only when a child does not respond that we start saying, well, maybe we need specially designed instruction. And to qualify for an IEP, you have to need the specially designed instruction or to be taught by a special education teacher. It requires that to have an IEP. And so we go through that referral process. Anytime in that referral process, if a parent makes a written request for evaluation and grants the consent, we start a 60-day timeline, 60 days that the child is in attendance to complete the evaluation. So you as a parent, if you feel that your child really needs it, then the RTI process, when that consent is made, it still continues. It will continue in regular ed everywhere that you go, but we start looking at the referral for specially designed instruction.
Question. Is the RTI automatic, or would you be
It's automatic.
charged?
Automatic.
So they're just doing it with you being...
They're doing it with everybody in the
extra
building. It's
services.
in
Okay.
regular ed. The RTI is out there in the classrooms. They're looking at children who are struggling. And they're starting those 3 tiers of intervention. And they're using that scientifically based researched instruction. We know it works with kids. We've seen the results. So I'm using it with you. And I'm teaching you. And then you may respond. So if you respond to the intervention, that tells me you don't have a disability because you are responding. So you can learn. But when you fail to respond, then we begin to look at further referral for IDEA. And that written request and consent. The consent must be given, and once the consent is given and received, clearly documented, collaborative business, everything in writing, nothing personal. Nothing personal, just business. So once that consent has been given, then the clock begins to tick on the 60 days that it has to be conducted. And here's what's really the present levels of academic achievement, developmental needs of the child. That's that baseline I keep talking about that evaluation determines. So if you don't have those clear, measurable things in the IEP, how can you track the progress? And the baseline is your present level. So when you look at each area and domain to which there is a need in, God, they have you back, Dad. You have that need, you gotta have that very clear present levels. And what we look at mastery levels that are on your IEP, how many know what mastery levels? Show of hands. Anybody? Okay, mastery level is how many times you're going to do it to show that you've mastered the goal. So if my goal was to safely cross the street without being struck by a car, what would the mastery level be? What percent? 100%, absolutely. So that is the mastery. So we look at goals that need to be measurable and achievable. So therefore, if they're achievable, I would want at least 80% mastery level, 8 out of 10. And what that means is if I can show that the child does it 8 out of 10 times consistently, the goal is mastered. Okay, so that's the 8 out of 10. 4 out of 10 trials is 80%. And 2 out of 5 is not good. That's only 40. So we take a look at those present levels of academic performance. Every time in an IEP meeting somebody says the word he needs, do you know what that means to me? What does it mean to you? Let's write a goal. Because IEPs are written based on the needs of the child, so if you're telling my child needs it, let's write a goal. He needs to sit still, let's write a goal. He needs to, let's write a goal. So it's based on those needs that we write the goals. The present levels are the baseline. Here's where we are now. We know that IEPs are written for the period of a year. So if we're here now, the goal is going to be 1 year from now. So this is our baseline. We have to report on that progress of the child. And when we have a goal, that's when you get all those accommodations, modifications, and the related services. When the effects of the child's exceptionality is on your IEP, what that says is that it's your child's disability. Can anybody in here cure disability? Would there be a line from this building to somewhere in northern Canada if you could do it? And my kid would be the first one in line. So if you can't teach disability, you make an accommodation or a modification, because that is the child's disability. So therefore you can't do that. A real easy example of that is children with autism that have really high sensory issues. So if you put them in a crowded hallway, what's going to happen? It's going to trigger behaviors. So you'll never be able to teach that. We assume that you can't because of the sensory issues unless you get those under control. So you're going to make an accommodation. And what that accommodation would be was that you would let the child transfer the hallway to the next class 5 minutes early, or 5 minutes later when the hallways are cleared out. So that's a very simple example of an accommodation that would be needed.
I have a question, sir.
Yes.
About the goals.
Okay.
When you write a goal for your student, then let's say he has an accommodation with that goal, like a one-on-one instruction.
Okay.
How do you, if the teacher, if let's say the ESC teacher is saying, well, little Johnny, this means you have to take 1 and add 5, so now you have 6. So now he's getting everything right, and he makes honor roll because he has that one-on-one. How do we know that the data is true to what he can do on his own?
Okay. In the goal that you just stated, originally the goal was with assistance. Ultimately, the goal would be about independently. So what you were saying in the form of a goal should have been a benchmark. The goal should have been independently, and the benchmark, their present level, is with assistance. He's currently doing it. And then we want to move him up to be starting to do it more independently. So the independence is the goal. With assistance is actually a present level.
Okay.
So right now he's doing it with it hand over hand or with a physical or verbal prompt. He's currently able to do this. That's present level. That's where he is. Independently is where we want to be. So therefore, the goal would be independently present level right now. So you always go back, and an IEP is never finished. It's always a living document. It's continuing. And it should be on your refrigerator, because as parents, you should be monitoring that progress and seeing that I'm heading toward the end of that goal. And because we have to report on that progress, and let's just go ahead and flip through, we're just going to leave this kind of a background here. And as we're reporting that progress as often as a non-disabled peer, so at least every 8 weeks, you should be getting a progress report on each of the goals on your child's IEP. Now, what I want to see is I want to see when it comes up 8 weeks, and I want to look at that goal, and my baseline in the beginning was 10%. I don't want to see a report that says that it's not achieved or we haven't mastered it. I want mastery level. I want to know if we were at 10% in the beginning, where are we now? Are we at 20% or are we 25 or 30? Because if we're 10 at the beginning of the year and we want 80 at the end of the year, I don't want to come up at the end of the year to find out I'm at 15. You should be able to find that by tracking that progress, your child's goals through the criteria and the data that's written in your IEP, how we're going to report on that progress. And you should be able to know within the first 8 weeks if I'm halfway there, if I'm a third of the way there. Because if I come up in 8 weeks and my original baseline is 10%, and 8 weeks I'm at 15%, am I going to hit 80 by the end of the year? Am I? No. So I'm going to ask to reconvene that IEP, or maybe a teacher conference to begin with. We always start with the teacher. You're always going to start by having that communication with the teacher, but then you go back to the formal process if you need to and making it an IEP request. There's no limit to the amount, the frequency of IEP meetings, the length of them, to be able to develop it. So you can always request that IEP meeting. If they're refusing an IEP meeting and a reasonable request, then you got this other procedural safeguard over here called written notice that you can request as to why you're denying that. We're tracking that progress to make sure that I'm going to hit that mastery level of 80% at the end of the year. I want to know that percentage of mastery level, and I want to see the concrete data to which you made that determination. And if you look at your child's IEP, you're going to see these things like, under that evaluation criteria, things like student demonstration, teacher-given test, teacher observation, whatever that may be. I want to see that. Where did you get the data that shows me work samples that they're able to do that they're doing it 5 out of 10 times, 6 out of 10 times, 9 out of 10 times. Because that is what we do as parents. We identify needs, and every time we say need, what does that mean? Goal. And I want to see the data that shows me I'm making the progress. And I've said this before, and now I'm saying it on film. I don't care if it's the bus driver teaching my child, as long as you can show me that the child is making measurable progress toward the goal by providing me with the data. Okay? Let's flip on. This is actually in the law. You can look these things up. You can go and read IDEA and the statutes that are up here on the screen. In your bags,
can we ask for a copy of that data? Is that our legal right, though?
Absolutely.
Like, can
Absolutely.
I have a copy of that?
Under the
records?
Family Education Rights and Privacy Act, you have a right to have a copy of anything that's personally identifiable about you and your child. That's under your right to records. So you ask for that nicely. Be sweet. Bring cookies. I love to bring cookies to IEPs. It's not personal. Have another cookie. And just do business. So in writing, you ask, I'd like to see the data. Look at your IEP. Look at that evaluation criteria there and what that is. And then ask for that data. Because we just don't want to pull these things out of the air, and that can happen. It can, yes, absolutely. Not that it would ever happen in my county. Maybe yours. But anyway, it's just business, and we go through that. And then when we look at these are your domains on the IEP. Let's think about when we write this IEP, The IEP has to include everything from the time your child steps over the curb in the front of your house until they step back. Transportation is a related service: to school, from school, in school, and around school. So what's it take to get my kid on the bus? What's it take to get them to school? What's it take to get them off the bus? What's it take them to be able to get around the school building, to go to classes, transition between classes, do all those things besides academically? So what I would like parents to do is I like you to write those things down. There's 5 domains. And then look at your child and say, you know, what does my child need? Because need means what? Goal. So what does my child need under curriculum and learning? Can he write? Can he add? Can he subtract? Can he do the things under the Sunshine State Standards in Florida, which is your curriculum, that a child at grade level can do? If not, what do I need under curriculum and learning? I said need, didn't I?
Goals.
Goals, absolutely. I want some goals under there. Then we take a look at independent functioning. Well, independent functioning, when you look at that, that can be toileting, it can be dressing, or it can be organizational skills. My kid's ADHD, can't get their homework together, can't turn it in, can't do this. He needs to turn his homework in. What did that tell you? Goal. You need a goal on turning in the homework. Those are organizational skills. So they can go under independent functioning. Then my child has behavioral issues. It's impeding with his ability to learn. So under social emotional, because he has needs, well, what are we going to write? Goals. And how are they going to be? Measurable and achievable, with criteria to report on them to show I'm making the progress. Baselines. Baselines is where we begin. And then we're going to go on to communication. Communication can be kids that are nonverbal, using assistive technology devices to express their wants and needs, or it can be just appropriate eye contact, kids with autism. Those things all under communication or under social emotional, either one of the two. And then we go down to healthcare. Healthcare is the 5th domain that has no goals in it. It just is a list of medical needs that the child may have to have delivered in a school environment to allow them to participate in the process. Effect of the disability. What did I say about that? That's accommodations, because you're not going to be able to cure a child's disability. And that present level of academic functional performance is your baseline. That's where you're beginning the process. That's where it has to be really clear and measurable of where I'm at, because I'm not going to be able to measure the success of the IEP unless I know where I'm beginning. And that's the present level, and that's your baseline. Yes?
When the school system gives your child the wrong testing for their disability, how do you make the school system go back and get the child
What
the
makes you think
appropriate
of, what
testing?
makes you think that it was wrong?
Well, our child has been tested for learning disabilities, but that test was the wrong test for her. We recently learned our child may have dyslexia, but we can't get the school system to go back and do the right testing.
Okay, and that dyslexia is a very tough one that you're dealing with, but however, you do have a right anytime that you give consent, but you had to give your consent for the testing prior to evaluation, and you disagree with that. You have the right to go outside the school system under what is called an independent educational evaluation, or that's your right to a second opinion. And so you make a written request saying, I disagree with the results of your test, because you're saying that based on the test that was given, those present levels of performance are incorrect. That's what you're saying, correct? So you disagree. So in writing, you're making a request to be provided with an independent educational evaluation. And under IDEA, what that says is you can go outside the school system, you can find a person with the same qualifications as the person who administered the test for the district. If the school psychologist did the testing, then you can go outside the school system, find a school psychologist who has no school affiliation whatsoever to write to a second opinion, to come in and administer the same or similar tests to the child. Now, the school system then has to pay for that test, or they have to initiate a due process hearing for you to deny you the right to that second opinion or independent. And what I do encourage parents to do, if you're going out to get a second opinion, make sure included in the cost of the independent, because there's a reasonable cost factor here in granting that that person is willing to either attend your IEP physically or to be able to, by conference call, to give the results of their testing. So you want that evaluator to come in and give their results to your IEP team. And when you do that, you have to keep in mind that all that the school system has to do is consider it. But the bottom line goes back to progress. What is the measurable goal for your child? And is that child making progress? And if they're not making progress, then I'm back at the IEP table. And that, the school system has the right to choose the methodology of how your child is being taught. And I think that's kind of where we're going in some of this. But we still have to make progress, whatever that is. So if I'm not making the progress, and how do I know I'm making progress? Yeah, oh God, you're good. Who said that? Give them a star over there. Data, concrete data. Show me that I'm making that progress. And if you can't show me the data that I'm making the progress, then I'm going to go back. And I'm going to go back and recommit my IEP, and I'm going to say we're not making the progress. So therefore, what I need to do is maybe it's methodology. Maybe I don't have enough support. I don't have the related services. But if I got the measure of where I am, I've got the measure of where I need to be, then I'm going to know. And how do I know? Data. I know that data is being provided, but you're showing me concretely that I'm making that progress. Because if I'm not, because we said the goal was measurable, and we said the goal was achievable when you wrote it. So what evaluation have you done in the meantime, because I didn't give any consent for one that I can recall, that shows me it's not. So therefore, the expectation would be that by the end of the year, I would be making the progress toward that goal. So I'm going to go back, always back to the IEP team. I'm going to make that request for an IEP team meeting. Or I may just begin with the teacher. I like to always start at that building level in the classroom with the teacher, because you have to get along with folks and you have to collaborate and support them to make this thing work in a public school system. So we can start there. Prior to the IEP meeting, they do not have to provide it to you, but if there's been evaluations that have been done, I'm going to make a written request to meet with that evaluator. And I just love having dads here. It's just a wonderful thing. See the percentage of fathers in this room? Should be equal. Should be equal. We should have as many dads here as we have moms here. It's not just the responsibility of mothers. And I am going to ask to meet with that evaluator to have a full understanding of the evaluation that's been conducted, because that evaluation determines what? Baselines. So if the baseline isn't correct, I need to go back and ask for my independent, or I need to put something in writing saying that I disagree with that, because that's what we're going to measure from. So once we have those baselines, prior to the IEP, meet with the evaluator, get that explained to you, then you can ask for a draft copy. They can't present you an IEP that's saying this is it, and this is what you get. You have to go to the IEP meeting and have that developed, but they can give you a draft of the present levels and goals and objectives that you can review prior to the IEP, so you're ready to do business when you sit down at the table. And the other thing I encourage parents to do is give the school system a list of your parent concerns. Sit down, look at those domains, write those things up, get them in paper, and present them to the school prior to the IEP meeting, so they have an opportunity to address each and every one of your questions before you get to the table. Because if you wait to the day of the meeting to ask a question, they may not have the answer for it, be prepared for it, and then you have to wait till the next meeting. Or wait some other time to get that answer to your question. So, list of parent concerns prior to it, asking for a draft of it, is helpful. And then going in and doing the meeting. During the meeting, always nice, bring cookies, be nice, just business, clear documentation, ask questions, have a full understanding of what's going on. Give all the inputs you can. Who's the expert on the child? Who knows the child the best?
Parents.
Parents do. Therefore, all the information you can provide to the school is really helpful to them to be able to understand and to teach your child. They need that input, and Congress recognized that. And after the meeting is over, the last thing I like to do, because sometimes it gets a little bit confusing, and we get on a little sidebar talking about how cute Johnny was dressed up last week, and the outfit the little Mary wore to school, and you lose track, you lose focus. So before I leave the table, that parent concern part, you have that as an agenda for you as a parent. You know these are the things you wanted, the questions you wanted to have answered. So when you get down to that last part there, as you're going through the meeting, if that gets answered, check it off the list. That got answered. I got my answer for that one. Oh, this one got answered. If they say, we need to get back to you on that, what's your next response? Who? When? Where? How? Who's going to get back to me? When are you going to get back to me? And how are you going to get back to me? And don't check that off your list. You can write down who's going to do that. It allows you to be able to kind of flow and get your ideas and questions answered by following that parent concern list that you provided them prior to the IEP meeting. And at the end of the meeting, what we need to do is we need to ask, can somebody please summarize what it is we have agreed to do at this meeting? So that we have that in writing, it's documented. And when we do that, after these things, there's measurable goals, all these things are added into the IEP. Curriculum, IEPs are curriculum-based, but they're not supposed to be a listing of curriculum. What a goal does is teach you that highlighted word, skill. How does that goal teach my child a skill? So goals teach a skill. Curriculum is a given. We're going to teach that curriculum. All children have access and should be taught the curriculum. But what skill do I need to be able to read? What skill do I need to be able to do my math? What do I need? What do I need to be taught? And that's what the goal should be. So these are examples of some goals. All this is on what? Where can you find this workshop? On the disc in your bag. So you can go home, and if Dad isn't here, you put on your bunny slippers, pop some popcorn, you grab Dad, you go into the computer, and you put the disc in and take this workshop with them. You can also take each and every one of our workshops, over 30 workshops, English, Spanish, and Creole, online by just simply logging in for free. You can take those online. They're also on the disc. So there's all this wealth of information that's out there that you can simply take on the disc. Okay?
Is in the disc, is in Spanish, or do I have to do it?
Spanish, English, and Creole.
In the disc.
Absolutely. Isn't that a wonderful thing?
And the other workshops that we weren't able to go to.
Absolutely. Every one of our workshops that is presented by Family Network on Disabilities is on that little disc that you have, or you can access them online, English, Spanish, and Creole, and we continue to develop those workshops and try to do as much outreach as we can. We also have the National Native American PTI, so we're even looking at that and presenting those materials to those families. So we're out there. We know that disability really isn't specific as to who it impacts. And it doesn't really ask you, do you want to do this? Nobody called me up 2 weeks and said, hey, do you want to do this? Because I would have said no. It just happens. And when it does, there you are. And when that happens to you, then you need this information, and you will continue to need this information. Because this is a lifelong thing.
How often can you request an IEP needing an immediate foster care, and if the person before us 2 months ago just had one and now the child can transition to our house, do we have the right to say we want one?
Absolutely. When you have a concern, any legitimate concern needs to be addressed through the IEP process.
In the school.
So you make the written request for the IEP meeting to be had. They don't have to grant it, but they have to give you written notice as to why they're refusing to. And if you have that legitimate concern, then I can't see a school system refusing to. Even if it's been 2 months ago, we have a whole new thing coming on here. If we're only allowed to have they're written for a period of year, but if you're only allowed to have one a year, what happens when a kid has a full-blown behavioral outburst? Do we wait till next year to address that? No. It's got to be working. If it's not working, I'm back to the table again. Nicely bringing cookies. Okay? Measured. See that? Measured. Got to report on that progress, and that's what we really need to do as parents, is to be able to show me the data that says my child is making that progress, that annual progress. So we want to take these online. How many are going to go home and take them online? How many are going to check those discs out that are in there? And how many are going to learn? Because it's a repetitive process continuously. We're out of time here. I knew we never even get close to the end. You can call us at 1-800-825-5736, which is also in the materials and on your desk. You can call me anytime. You can email me through Family Network on Disabilities. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. We're on MySpace. We're out there for you. I get paid to answer your questions and provide you support and training. But if you don't ask, I can help you. So that's what we are out here. That's our sole purpose of Family Network on Disabilities, is help you. So thank you for coming today. Please take time to fill out your evaluation. And I hope something that's said today will be helpful. But the number one